Hello, homies. This is Sarah.
And this is Ashley. And this is Hometown Homicide.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Hope you guys liked the story from last week. I'm still pumped about it. And actually super pumped about her story this week.
I am. I put a lot of time into this one. I've been ready for a while.
Yes. We're actually recording early because she was like on it.
I went down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
On this one.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I have like a lot of exciting things that could be possibly happening in the next shit month. Not a shit month, but... and I just... Oh, I want to share it, but I don't want to get, like, my hopes up. I don't want to jinx it, but,
She is amped.
Folks. But any news?
It's not true crime, but, I almost just said, that girl died, which doesn't narrow it down at all. But that girl from Toddlers and Tiaras, that...
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah, suicide.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sad.
After prom, I think.
Well, I know I saw a headline saying something about she had just attended her prom. I didn't know, like, I didn't.
Well, that's what, I mean, from what I read, she went to prom and then she was gone.
Ugh, that's sad.
Also, heard the news, if you guys listen to Crime Junkie.
Oh, yeah.
Sad news about Britt. So, Hometown Homicide is thinking about you.
Yes.
That was very sad to hear.
Good vibes.
I'm glad she's doing better.
Yeah.
But, and shout out to our new Patreon.
Sam.
Yeah.
What's up, Sam? Appreciate you.
That's awesome.
I need to get your address still. I'll message you before you even hear this, but to send the koozie and stuff.
I was like, welcome to the fuckery. Hope you enjoyed the bonus episode.
Yeah.
So, what the fuck, but very sad news. And then I just saw an update. Oh, a few updates on that. If you don't have Patreon, you probably don't know what we're talking about. But the one in Wisconsin, it was his cousin that he raped and murdered.
My cop friend said that he was pretty sure that it was, and I'm like, that's bizarre.
And he planned it.
Yeah, and terrible and awful.
And then the Lockton syndrome, they're saying the parents are saying she wanted to sit there for 12 years. She requested it.
Maybe to sit there, but not sit there in that.
And they didn't, in the updated article, they didn't say anything about Lockton syndrome.
Really?
But that's it. That's all I have.
Yeah.
Hopefully next episode I'll have some good news to share because I will not keep quiet. Eek, eek. Today we're going to take you back. Another Iowa one. This happened in our own backyard.
Like literally.
But it came back, and you know how I love a case that's been solved.
After many, many moons.
After many, 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 many decades. So this is Michelle Martinko, forever 18. It was December 19th, 1979, and Michelle Martinko, 18 years old, and a senior at Kennedy High School, attended a banquet for the Kennedy Concert Choir at the Sheraton Inn in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Michelle was in her favorite black jersey dress, black scarf, black tights, and heels, with her waist-length white and brown rabbit fur coat. She looked like an angel. Some say Charlie's Angel. She asked her friend Jane if she wanted to go shopping with her at the brand new Westdale Mall on the southwest side of Cedar Rapids, which is sad because all that's left is JCPenney.
Yeah.
Like, it is gone.
And they must close early, or ish. I went and got Roadhouse the other night.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like 7:30 and Penny's had nothing. Like, no cars were around it.
It's just sad. Like, this...
It was a booming place.
It said Westdale Mall at that time, because it was brand new when this happened, was a place to be, and all the kids would hang out there. Jane declined Michelle because she had homework, so Michelle headed to the mall by herself in her family's 1972 Buick Electra with $180 in her brown leather purse. Michelle wanted to get a new winter coat because it's Iowa, it's December, it's really cold. So like I said, Westdale Mall was brand new. It had a little over 100 stores, and it's right before Christmas, so it was really busy this night. Michelle Martinko was born October 6th, 1961, to parents Albert and Janet Martinko in Cedar Rapids. And she was what her sister described as a miracle baby. Because after her sister Janelle was born, they tried many times to give Janelle a sibling, but endured many miscarriages. But when Janet was 44, she gave birth to a healthy baby Michelle.
Oh, 44.
Because they kind of gave up, lost hope, and then got pregnant. In middle school, Michelle wore a back brace because she had scoliosis, which made her really shy. But by high school, that's when she blossomed. Michelle was described as being a girly girl. She was bright, friendly, and definitely stood out in a crowd. She was beautiful, striking, as some would describe, and she was impossible to miss. A real head turner with the most gorgeous golden blonde hair that many said looked like Farrah Fawcett. Her brother-in-law, John, said that was her nickname, Farrah. Michelle was also a really talented performer. She joined the twirling squad, which is baton twirling, as a sophomore and performed in choir and theater. That night, Michelle went to different stores and talked to friends that worked at the mall, and was last seen around 8 or 9 p.m. outside a jewelry store in the mall. Kurt Thomas, who was working in a men's clothing store, ran into Michelle and spent his entire break chatting with her. He was the last person to see Michelle when he walked her to the mall exit. Kurt said Michelle was saying her goodbye, and she smiled at him. He calls it the Michelle smile. And she left to the parking lot to her car. Looking back, he wished she would have walked her to her car. Since it was a school night, it wasn't a night for her to stay out late. So when Michelle still hadn't returned home by 2 a.m., her father, Albert, reported her missing and began searching for her along with police. I guess her mom kept calling 911 because oh, she's a teenager, she's doing teenage stuff, and she's like, no, she's not. So at 4 a.m., police officer Kincaid found the Martinko's tan and green 1972 Buick that Michelle was driving in the northeast corner of the mall parking lot, a far walk to the JCPenney. Because it's December in Iowa, Kincaid wasn't able to see through the windshield due to the frost to determine if anyone was in the car. So he opened the back door and he could see there was a woman in the front, but he initially thought it was an intoxicated older woman. So he walked around to the other side and looked in the passenger side window, and he could tell it was not an intoxicated lady. Instead, it was Michelle, who was inside, collapsed over the passenger seat, stabbed to death. Michelle had been stabbed 29 times in her face, neck, and chest.
Jesus.
Her hands had defensive wounds, which indicated she fought back. And they said it was a real fight. It was overkill. It was determined with the lack of blood outside of the car that Michelle was killed while in the car, and the medical examiner estimated she had died between 8 and 10 p.m. But if they saw her around 9, and if she was leaving when the mall was about to close, would have been 9:30. Michelle was killed with a sharp-pointed weapon, but not definitively a knife, and size of the weapon could not be determined. Whoever killed Michelle left no fingerprints, which led police to believe they had to have worn gloves. The $180 Michelle took to the mall was still in her purse. So robbery was ruled out as a motive right away. She was fully dressed, but her dress was pulled up a little bit, and it was later determined by the medical examiner that she had not been sexually assaulted.
Oh, that's good.
So that ruled out as a motive. The inside of the car was covered in blood splatter, but no blood was found outside of the car. Even though there was no blood trail, the killer left glove prints on the outside of the door in the dirt on the door handle. Looked like dishwashing gloves from the 70s, that everyone would have had in their house. Due to the nature of the killing, police considered this to be personal, based on the number and location of stab wounds. But what was the motive?
Hey homies, just a quick break here to remind everyone that Ashley and I appreciate you guys so much. All the likes, the comments, the messages that we get, we thoroughly enjoy getting them. We love hearing from you, and we do love you guys. So keep it up.
The blood inside the car showed the struggle took place on the passenger side of the car, but the gear shift and steering wheel had blood on it. Police believe the killer touched those after he killed Michelle. They thought maybe he cut himself, and they say but he cut himself during the attack and left his own blood behind. But in 1979, it was almost impossible to link that DNA to a suspect. Back then, they used blood typing to determine what type of blood someone had, but they still collected the blood for analysis. Besides that, there wasn't anything else at that scene they could use to link to a suspect. And they got some tips like, it was, we saw someone staring at mannequins at the mall. It had to have been that person. Or we saw, someone attack someone with a knife a couple miles away. They had like random tips. And because they had few leads, the police turned to the public for help. And they got more than 200 tips in weeks following her killing. There were many rumors and theories circulating around Cedar Rapids about Michelle herself. Some theories included drug rings to prostitution rings, and that she brought this on herself and that was her fault. These rumors, of course, hurt Michelle's parents to the point her mom didn't even want to leave the house.
Oh, I bet.
But because of the crime being so personal, her ex-boyfriend, Andy Seidel, was looked at as a suspect. Actually, most people believe that Andy did it. After all, he was known to be possessive about his girlfriend, due to which he was not always liked by those close to her. And Andy was at the mall that night Michelle was killed to buy her a Christmas present, even though they broke up. And they broke up because Michelle didn't want to be tied to anybody. Yeah. And they weren't on bad terms.
Oh, well, that's good.
By any means, from what he said.
Yeah.
So it just seemed like too much of a coincidence that he was there. But Andy claimed he didn't know anything had happened to Michelle until Michelle's mom called to ask him if he heard from her daughter. This is when he apparently felt as though something wasn't right, and so along with his mother, he went out to try to find her. Detectives thought they had an easy arrest, but there was no evidence to link Andy to the murder. And basically every male that knew Michelle was considered a suspect. I mean, anybody.
Yeah.
Mike Wyrick, who dated Michelle while he was in high school. I think he was a year older than her. He was even questioned, even though he was over 100 miles away at college. So he was never considered a serious suspect and was cleared, but he was still, since he knew her. Kurt Thomas, who saw her at the mall, was a suspect. Anyone who talked to her. At Michelle's funeral, though, Andy's actions seemed suspicious. He was basically in the casket with Michelle, hugging her and sobbing. And I guess he even stated he needed to know who Michelle loved when she died. Did she love him or Mike?
I mean, that's definitely odd, but
Doesn't
people
mean
do odd things when they're mourning. And...
Exactly. By 1986, this case was cold after everyone had been looked at and the investigation was dead in the water. In 2005, Detective Doug Larison was in charge, and he had even gone to high school with Michelle. Didn't really know her, but he felt like he had to solve this case in her honor since they were schoolmates. And DNA had emerged as a forensic tool by 2005. He discovered while reading her file that in the early investigation, another detective had sent blood scrapings found on the gear shift of the car in for testing, but no one had followed up with the results. He found that not only did the gear shift have DNA, but it was male DNA. It's assumed, like I said earlier, that the killer cut himself during the attack because Michelle was fighting so hard.
Right.
And that's how his blood ended up there. Larison then sent the dress Michelle was wearing to the lab for further testing and found a spot of blood DNA. I'm going to make that very clear. It was blood DNA on the dress with a full male DNA profile, and it was consistent with the blood DNA found on the gear shift. Now that they just need that one person that matches that DNA profile.
Yeah.
Larison also shipped the blood samples to CODIS, which is a nationwide database of DNA collected from arrested offenders. If the person who killed Michelle had a previous record, CODIS would give them a hit. But unfortunately, they didn't get a hit, so now they really had work to do. They had to locate all the people they originally interviewed.
Yeah.
All those people that they thought could have done it, now they have DNA.
Yeah.
They collected DNA samples from over 125 different people. They had to convince them to take a DNA test. On the top of their list was Andy Seidel.
Yeah.
They told Andy if he gave them his DNA and it doesn't match, he will be eliminated and he'll be finally cleared. So, of course, he gave his DNA and it wasn't a match, and he was cleared. Both of Michelle's parents died believing Andy killed their daughter. Albert died in 1995, and her mom, Janet, died in 1998. They were certain it was Andy.
I totally forgot about that.
So this
So sad.
made Andy himself a victim.
Yeah.
Because not only was it his parents, but a lot of people thought he did it. Mike Wyrick's DNA was tested, but no match. Even Kurt, who was the last one to see Michelle, had his DNA tested, and again, no match. They thought if they swabbed enough men, they would come across a suspect, so they continued looking for a match, and after testing all 125 people, no match, and they were all eliminated. Now it's 2015. Matt Denlinger took over as a lead detective. Matt was 5 years old when Michelle was stabbed to death. His
crazy.
father, Harvey Denlinger, at that time was a Cedar Rapids police detective, although he was not assigned to Michelle's case. So,
But still, like, that's wild.
exactly. Now, the facts had not changed, but DNA technology did. Denlinger reached out to Parabon Nanolabs, and they were able to make a picture of the potential suspect from that DNA sample.
What other... I'm sorry, I'm interjecting this bit. What other case did you do maybe a month ago that Parabon Nanolabs was referenced? Was it the Queen of the Massage Parlors?
Nope. That was... because she was a murderer in that one.
Yeah,
She's in prison.
That's true. Was it the chick that got stalked?
Nope, that's still unsolved to this day.
Okay.
It was... because, like I said, I like to do...
Yeah, totally. But as soon as you said it, I was like, wait, Parabon Nanolabs. I've heard that before coming out of your mouth because you were like tongue-tied.
Lee Rotatori.
Oh.
No, that was you.
No, Lee Rotatori was you.
Okay, it was. I've been so
She
involved
moved
in this
from-
one.
Yeah, they moved from like Chicago or some shit to like Council Bluffs area all the way across Iowa.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yep. And then
she was stabbed to death in her hotel room, and
after living it, yep. All right. So he reached out to Parabon, and they're able to make a picture of the potential suspect from that DNA sample. Parabon calls this technique snapshot, not to be confused with what you put in your car from Progressive,
I was just thinking that. I was like, oh,
which
weird.
creates composite face imaging sketches based on DNA samples. So this suspect was likely a white male with blonde hair and blue eyes. So they made different sketches with different hairstyles because the DNA could not tell them what their hair looked like, how they styled it. One was at the age of 25, one at the age of 50, and one with a typical 1979 haircut. And so they had a press conference and shared the sketches, and the tips rolled in. Nothing panned out from those tips because they would be looking at every blonde hair, blue-eyed guy that ever stepped foot in Iowa. Denlinger wasn't sure where to go next until an unrelated case. California's Golden State Killer Joseph D'Angelo, who was arrested in 2018 with the help of genetic genealogy. the charting of DNA from one family member to another. Basically a DNA family tree. Parabon was ready to test the sample. They already had one more time. They searched a public national database called GED Match, which is of anyone who submitted their own DNA to trace their own personal family tree. July 2018, the report came back and they found a relative of the killer. So Brandy Jennings in Vancouver, Washington is the second cousin once removed to the male whose DNA was found on Michelle's bloody dress in her car. It took them months building Brandy's family tree all the way back to her great-great-grandparents. As more blood relatives of Brandy provided their DNA, they reached back out to Parabon and a match came back from a relative in Lisbon, Iowa.
Really?
Yep. They took her DNA and sent it back to Parabon again. And boom. She had enough DNA to be a first cousin to the killer. And then they were able to narrow it down to 3 brothers who lived in Iowa. They're getting closer. Research on Donald, Kenneth, and Jerry Burns began. Denlinger and his team set up a plan to collect DNA samples from all 3 brothers and do it without them knowing. So they followed one to lunch, grabbed a straw, next a toothbrush from the trash he threw out, and the third brother, Jerry, which they traveled to Manchester, Iowa, which a lot of stuff I read said it was only 45 minutes away from Cedar Rapids.
False.
That is not true.
You're going maybe 90.
It's about an hour because Delhi is about 50 minutes from Cedar Rapids, and Manchester's a little bit further north than Delhi. How do I know? My mom lived there. Another podcast said right up the road. No, it's not even, no.
It's not.
But
what
they're
right
not
up
from
the
here.
road
It's fine.
means.
I
That
mean,
was-
but if they
that
would
was
have looked
on
at a
me.
map, they would have seen Manchester wasn't right up the street from
Well,
Westdale Mall.
Exactly. Bitches.
Okay, so the third brother, Jerry, which they traveled to Manchester, Iowa, and found Jerry Burns at the pizza ranch. I've been there. And so they collected the straw he was using. Don and Kenneth were not a match. Jerry Burns' DNA was an exact match. The lab reported that the scientific probability was 100 billion to 1. Also, that Parabon sketch that was very similar to a young Jerry Burns.
Nice.
And also, like, don't be confused with Jerry Burns, who was a coach for Iowa and the Minnesota Vikings, because
Oh,
there was another Jerry Burns in Iowa, but
interesting.
he was a coach for Iowa.
I did not know that.
Said Iowa a lot there.
Iowa.
Jerry Burns was born December 23rd, 1953. Would have been 25 with 2 young kids when he killed Michelle. He grew up in Manchester. He was married to Patricia Burns, who had died from suicide in 2008.
Aw.
Jerry Burns had 0 connections to Michelle and no criminal record. He was a respected businessman. December 19th, 2018, exactly 39 years to the day after Michelle was murdered, Denlinger went to interview Jerry at his business. Denlinger used a hidden camera inside a coffee mug trying to get a confession. So first, Denlinger showed him the computer sketch from the DNA snapshot and said that they received a tip and that's just why they were there. Obviously, that was not the truth, but they just wanted to get his reaction and to see if he would start talking.
Hashtag police work.
Jerry didn't think it looked anything like him and denied knowing Michelle.
Of course.
And he didn't know her.
Well, I
he
mean,
probably
that's true, but I just mean, of
had
course,
no
you're gonna
idea
say
who
that
she
that
was.
That doesn't look like me.
Denlinger then told him the reality is we have your DNA at the crime scene, and so we know you were there that night. This happened. How could we get your DNA at the crime scene there, Jerry? Jerry what the
When the fuck did we get ice cream?
I don't know what's
You know I'm quoting, right?
No.
What? What's that fucking movie called?
So you don't even know.
No,
Boom.
I do. Oh, for fuck's sake! It's the Special Olympics. Johnny Knoxville.
You scratched my CD in plain daylight.
Yeah, took it about daylight and just scratched it. When the fuck did we get ice cream? I keep wanting to say The Replacements, and that's the football movie. Because his name is Jeffy Dahmer. Or he, like, says his name is Jeffy Dahmer.
I know what you're talking about.
Bother me. Everybody's yelling at me.
Jerry responded he didn't know and to test the DNA. but he did acknowledge he did go to Westdale Mall with his family in the past. When Denlinger asked him what happened that night, Jerry said, "I don't know, test the DNA." When asked if he murdered someone that night, he responded again with test the DNA. The entire time he is being interviewed, Jerry's shop cat Bella was all over him. The DNA was enough to arrest Jerry for the murder of Michelle Martinko. And we have the interview that we will play now, courtesy of KCRG TV9.
The reality is we're not here on a whim. We're here to confirm what we already know. I already collected some DNA from you that you got rid of before. And so I'm telling you, Jerry, I already know that your DNA is going to match the DNA that we have on file.
This one there, I got rid of.
Well, people get rid of stuff all the time. Just throw it away. But I think that's kind of irrelevant to what we're talking about here. Jerry, so the reality is we have your DNA at the crime scene. And so we know you were there that night this happened. But what we don't know, Jerry, is why it happened. There's a lot of reasons things happen in life. And there might be an explanation for this that would help us better understand what happened. That would not make this, a terrible thing for you. But I don't know what that explanation would be if I don't hear it from you.
Well, I don't know.
How would we get your DNA at the crime scene there, Jerry?
I don't know. Test it, see if it is.
No, we did. How would it be there, Jerry?
I don't know.
What happened that night?
Wait for the test to come back.
Jerry,
I don't think it did.
It did.
I don't think so.
Okay. Jerry, what happened that night?
I don't know. Test it and see what happens.
Yeah, we're going to test this.
Okay. Go ahead and test it.
We are. But what I'm telling you is I'd already collected some DNA from stuff you discarded, and it matched our sample from the crime scene, Jerry. Can we back up for a second?
On the way back to Cedar Rapids, a camera was rolling in the police car, and Jerry mentioned something about things being blocked out of memories.
Oh, you fucking asshole.
But Denlinger knew that the second Jerry refused to deny it or even provide a plausible explanation that they had the right guy. You would expect if someone came to you and said, "Hey, we have your DNA at a crime scene." Instead of saying, "I don't know," would you if you had nothing to do with it, would you deny it? Or would you just say, "You don't know what happened? I have no idea. I don't remember. I don't know."
Yeah, no.
The fact that he did not even once deny this was really suspicious. The day after his arrest, on December 20th, 2018, a district judge set his bond for $5 million, claiming that the crime he committed was heinous and brutal. Jerry pleaded not guilty to murder in January of 2019. In February 2020, Jerry Burns went on trial in Davenport, Iowa, over an hour away because of the buzz surrounding the case in Cedar Rapids.
Just right down the road.
Just right down the road. There were a lot of eyes on this case. I mean, multiple generations of people, because it's now been 4 decades after the murder. Many of Michelle's friends testified, including Andy Seidel and Mike Wyrick, and they had to relive it all over again. First Assistant Prosecutor for Lynn County, Nick Maybanks, had science on his side, his DNA. Maybanks said that there were files found on Jerry's computer, deviant or violent pornography, featuring prominently young blonde women. I mean,
you can't fault someone for having porn per se.
And, you can't say, "Oh, that's he's a murderer because of that."
Right,
but
right.
DNA doesn't lie.
Right. Science.
The defense, and I'm not even going to mention the defense lawyer. He looked really familiar, to be honest, but this was a joke. The defense argued that there was no doubt the DNA belonged to Jerry, but how it got there was another matter.
Oh, God.
They argued it was plausible that the DNA got there by transfer, because every time you come into contact with something, you shed DNA. Sure.
Oh, you fuck twats.
Sure, okay.
And I know exactly why you're, yep.
And that because Michelle was in the same mall Jerry had been in, it was transferred when Michelle sat down at a table in the food court. So she just happened to be in the food court and sat down at a table that Jerry Burns had once sat at. And that's why his blood DNA.
That hurts my brain that
I'm
that
yelling.
was such a recent case that's the shit they tried to pull. That's like getting an STD from a toilet seat now. Like that's the equivalent of that shit right there.
Yes. So how
Oh my God.
did his blood end up in her car and on her dress? She didn't get that by sitting down at a table in the Westdale Mall
it's not
food
touch
court.
DNA, it's blood DNA, you fucking
Jerry's
asshat.
brother Don said because Jerry used to work in a dealership that sold Buick cars,
Oh, fuck you!
that there's a possibility that the Martinko's car went through that dealership and his DNA would be in the car. Again, it wouldn't be blood DNA on her dress.
Yeah. Oh my God.
According to Matt Denlinger, that is a fantasy. Anyone with common sense will know that's impossible. There was only one way Jerry's DNA got in that car.
Yeah.
I really like this Matt Denlinger.
I just like that last name, Denlinger.
The defense also said there was no way Jerry would commit such a crime. A married man with young children at home wouldn't leave his home and drive to Cedar Rapids at night, kill Michelle, and then leave to go back. Odd, yes.
Yeah.
But, again, DNA
Yeah.
doesn't lie. 100 billion to one match.
Well, and I wonder, because Manchester is, just up the road, I guess Lindale Mall would have been closer as far as malls go here in town. I wonder if the mall, was it the Kennedy Mall in Dubuque? If that was even a mall at that point or whatever. Because since it's right before Christmas, I'm thinking, maybe he decided to come down to the mall and do Christmas shopping or whatever. And he just, saw her, got obsessed, followed her type.
I mean, she
latched
was
onto her.
like they said, she was a head turner.
Yeah.
She was stunning. People paid attention to her.
Her outfit sounded gorgeous.
Oh, you'll see the pictures. I mean, she was beautiful. The jury only took 3 hours to find Jerry Burns guilty of first-degree murder. Jerry was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Finally, the case that haunted Cedar Rapids for 40 years was closed. But now, some wonder if Michelle was Jerry's only victim. Jerry had randomly brought up Jody Huisentruit in his interview that December day in 2018.
Really?
Yep. Jody disappeared in 1995 in Mason City, 2 hours from Manchester where Jerry lived, and has never been found. You can listen to this. I covered this episode 3, which oddly we posted on December 19th.
Oh, that's
on
what you were
Instagram.
getting at. She had texted me. I was like, oh, there's a weird coincidence.
That's not the only one.
Well, still. That's,
Unfortunately, though, in that episode, we were brand spanking new and we were having mic issues and we did not know. So if you do listen to that,
please forgive us.
yes.
Have patience.
There is no evidence that there is a connection, but Mason City Police will not disclose if they are investigating Jerry, and his DNA is not connected to any other cases. Michelle fought so hard that it caused her killer to cut himself to leave his DNA, so in a way, Michelle helped solve her own murder. But Nick Maybanks quoted it best. It's not about how she died, it's about how she lived. And let us know what you think. Do you think Jerry's DNA ended up in the car and on her dress from DNA transfer? And do you think there is a possibility he is connected to the disappearance of Jody Huisentruit? So, update. Jerry has hired Chicagoland attorney Kathleen Zellner, who is famous for representing Stephen Avery from Netflix Making a Murder. And her office is planning on appealing Jerry's conviction. I don't know how you appeal DNA.
Yeah, that's... They'll
And here-
probably... Fuck, Jesus.
And so here's the other very strange coincidence. On December 19th, 2013, Jerry's cousin Brian Burns, who is 55, disappeared from his home in Manchester. The Delaware County Sheriff's Office says Brian Burns remains an active missing person case, but at this point has no link to Jerry. So he was, I guess, last seen talking about getting a ride, and it said on December 19th. I'm like, wait a second. So I had seen that he had a missing cousin, but no connection to him. But like, how do you know that? Like, how do they know they haven't found him?
That's bizarre.
Like, he might have. Like, just what I'm thinking is, maybe he just gets it in his mind to do something bad and then does it and then goes back to his normal life.
Yeah,
I don't
it
know.
out of his system, kind of, and
But that, I want to know what people think. I wish I would have gone more into detail with Jody Huisentruit.
but there's not a ton since she hasn't been found. It's not like there's.
I also read that Mason's is in another article. I read it yesterday that they believe Mason City police believe they interviewed someone who had provided information and that they're going to find her or know what happened to her very soon. I don't know if it's true, but that's what I read.
That would be still sad, obviously, but
But why would he have gone to Mason City?
keep it away from home.
And I guess she was on TV and she was blonde, but
Yeah.
you can't say, oh, well, he did it because she was blonde and so was Michelle. Because right now, that's all they really have to
Right.
And by the way, he did bring it up. Like, it's in the interview, courtesy of KCRG TV9.
Well, that was a good one, Ashley. Good job. Good job.
Now I don't know what else to do. Oh, I want to get Sarah to do the Sprite challenge with me. I'm a little nervous, but let us know if we should. If you don't know what the Sprite challenge is, please go to TikTok. You will laugh.
I mean, there's no way in hell I'm going to get through a whole 20 ounce.
Oh,
and
I
not
won't either.
burp. There's absolutely no way. I'm like the queen of belching. Social medias are pretty much Hometown Homicide Podcast, except Ope Murder.
On Twitter.
Twitter. We want to tell stories to you, not about you. So stay safe.
And this was Hometown Homicide.